Good morning. Good morning. It's hard to tell what it is outside in this beautiful, gorgeous room. And just a quick word, certainly on my behalf, maybe Kees as well, to say thank you very much for this opportunity to kick off this next stage after such a dramatic morning. That was a remarkable presentation. It kind of puts maybe the rather dry conversation that we might be having. We'll try not to make it dry. I think Kees will do our best to make it as point and counterpoint as possible, though I'm not here as a debater. I'm here as an experiencer and a student of life, and I'm delighted that SNF are putting so much effort and focus on polarization at the moment. I'm from the UK, where we have to keep an eye on the news every 5 minutes to find out what's going on over there, whether we still have a prime minister or not. And a lot of this has been driven by some of the issues that are being tackled today. So I think the plan is I'm meant to say a few words first. Kees, you're going after me, yes? And then we're going to do a little bit of backwards and forwards, and we've got half an hour to cover this very small topic of migration, security, identity, and nationalism. So kicking off my 12 minutes now, Gloria, I suppose what I want to say is the combination of these four factors today strike me as presenting one of the biggest political challenges of this decade. I'm just going to focus on Europe. We're in Europe. I might make the odd reference to the United States, but these, again, are my personal reflections. I'm not some migration expert, but as I said, I'm somebody who believes, and whose institution believes, this is a fundamentally critical topic for us to undertake. I think the refugee crisis, in particular, of 2015, has made many people feel like they've hit a kind of perfect storm. A storm affecting their national identity and their economic security. And the symptoms, you've all seen them there. It's Brexit, it's Trump, it's the rise of far-right parties. It's also the collapse in many European countries of the center-left. It's a polarization of national discourse between those who think of themselves as more socially liberal and maybe those who don't think of themselves but are called illiberal. But it's also a discourse between those who think they have to protect liberal values from what they see as the assaults of migration. I just want to argue a simple point. I think immigration is not a problem per se, nor is Muslim immigration a problem per se. It's potentially a huge opportunity for societies around the world, not just in Europe. But I'm willing to accept, and I think it is a fact, that the concerns of immigration are real. The feelings of insecurity connected with migration have been heightened by broader feelings of insecurity driven by globalization, by the rise of Islam and the fears over what Islam represents, and by inept government responses. And overcoming these concerns is going to take a long time. It'll take intelligent policy, it'll take social engagement, but if we can do those things, then I think we can help build more dynamic, vibrant, prosperous societies rather than closing ourselves down. Let me also say, we've got no option. Immigration is happening and is going to keep happening for the next 10, 15, 20 years. It's part of where Europe is. So let me say a couple of words about context, how I think about this issue, some things about benefits, a few things about problems, and a few things of what we do about it. On the context, I do want to take on this issue of national identity. And I suppose say something about why I'm positive about it. National identity is not the same as nationalism. Nationalism strikes me as celebrating a country's and a nation's differences from other people, from the other, from outsiders. It assumes one nation's superiority over other nations. It implies in a way that we're fixed tribes. In fact, I don't think national identity is something fixed in stone. It's not defined so much about what others are, it's more about what we share. It's about myths. Principally, I think it's about shared history and about shared institutions. The UK, as an example, has a history. You know, island nation, victor of World War II, we won the 1966 World Cup and keep wondering when it's going to happen again. And then on institutions, we've got Parliament, we've got the Queen. In the US, you've got your Declaration of Independence in the history. You've got fighting for freedom, you've got the Constitution and the flag in terms of institutions today. I don't think these items, the shared history or the institutions, are necessarily diluted by immigration. Immigrants can contribute to shared history, and they can participate in, benefit from, and help strengthen shared institutions. If I can just give one example, a country like the United Kingdom has gone through waves of immigration, going back to the early parts of the Angles, the Saxons, 2,000 years ago, right through the Normans, through the West Indian immigration we had, immigration from Pakistan, from India. We now have a Muslim mayor, who is being tweeted against by Donald Trump as somehow not representing perhaps the United Kingdom, but who represented it incredibly well. Europe has seen people move through it for millennia. It is Europe, the continent of Europe is people moving, as much as the United States is. And how, do we fare from this? What is it that migration potentially brings through this process? Let me mention 5 points quickly. Number one, they can contribute to social welfare, and certainly today to social welfare systems that are under big pressure because of demographic change, because they bring economic vitality and capacity. A country like Spain saw itself go from social security deficit in 2000 to social security surplus in 2004 through a wave of about 3 million immigrants that came in from Latin America. In the United Kingdom, where we've had this big debate over Brexit, immigrants contributed roughly, from Europe alone, £20 billion net over 10 years between 2001 and 2011 into the social welfare budget. British citizens took £700 billion out over that same period. Second, in a way, immigrants are about bringing dynamism into the economy itself. If you look at what dynamic societies can do with immigrants, the United States obviously is the poster child here. Just as one example, over half of American startups worth over $1 billion have at least one immigrant as a founder. You've got 40% of immigrants have won Nobel Prizes for chemistry, medicine, and physics. In contrast, I'd say that most surveys that show that immigration cuts down jobs, or reduces pay for locally born workers, these simply are not borne out by the facts. The facts is this is driven by automation, it's driven by slow recovery from financial shocks. Even crime, people say more immigrants, more crime. Crime, again, study after study has proven, is connected principally to economic opportunity or risk. And you then think of the positives that immigrants bring to the other worlds that are celebrated here by SNF and by many of you who are represented here. Sports, the arts, the diversity leads to strength, leads to creativity, leads to capacity. So when I think about how we cope with the flow of migration here, I think we need to, at one point, think that if possible, migrants can be huge contributors to our societies. Now, that assumes everything is possible. And let me turn to the problems. Why is immigration causing such problems today, in particular in Europe? I think there's 4 principal reasons. Number one, successful immigrants are integrated and absorbed into societies. This does not happen quickly. Inevitably, it doesn't happen quickly. And right now, we have vast numbers of people on the move. 60 million refugees, over 200 million transitional migrants looking for economic opportunities. And if you think Europe has faced a big push of migration from Syria, etc., wait till you see the real moves coming from sub-Saharan Africa, which I think are going to be even larger over time. So clearly, the pace of absorption and the pace of migration is going to present huge challenges to European societies over the coming years. Secondly, this big influx that we've seen since 2015, in particular of migration, is coinciding with the worst moment of economic globalization, where we're on the tail end of a stretched out austerity response to the financial crisis and the challenges of globalization. In the end, in a nutshell, my sense is the governments in the West that launched globalization never adapted or helped their own societies adapt fully to that globalization at home. And the result has been stagnant incomes, median incomes in particular for working class families that have been flat for 20 years. Nothing to do with migration, nothing to do with migration, to do with bad decision-making taking places domestically. Some governments thought that migration would be the answer. Let's get more migrants in, it'll drive growth. But in fact, what it's done is actually exacerbate some of the differentiation between societies feeling that this migration is more of the change of globalization and creating great sources of public concern. The third point I'd make about the problems, again, it's down to governments, not down to migrants. Governments are not in control. It was a great phrase that the Brexit team used when they said, take back control. Because if you look at the EU with its Schengen agreement, open borders internally within Europe, no external borders. Citizens judge their governments on whether they feel they're in control. And if people don't think the government's in control, they'll go and look for other answers. So being able to think about external borders, I'll come back to in a minute, is critical. I could argue even quickly that Brexit was caused partly because the British government did not think in 2004, after the big enlargement to Central Eastern Europe, it was one of the only 2 countries not to use the 7-year derogation to prevent Labour from coming in. We just opened up our market while others didn't. So Britain had a huge wave of immigrants from Central Eastern Europe. Even though they contributed well to the economy, the public felt the government had lost control. Then we get to the fourth issue, which is the unique phenomenon of Muslim immigration. Now, I'm not an expert on Islam, but I would say these comments. Islam appears to be a religion that transcends nationhood. It is a religion that is deeply contested, that is at war with itself if you look at what's happening between Shia and Sunni communities around the world. It is one that can have ambivalence, and members of it, towards national institutions. There is a capacity in trying to stay within that community that ghettos can be created, whether it's in parts of Brussels, Bradford, or Paris. And you can end up with detachment and with a continuation of values that feel alien within our societies, in particular how women are treated. But the misperceptions that are connected through these challenges of migration are probably bigger than the truths. When French voters have been asked recently, what bigger proportion do you think Muslims will be of French society by 2020? The rough estimation, done in recent polling by Ipsos Mori, is 40%. In fact, the rate today is 8% of Muslims in French society. And by all analyses that can take place at the moment, at most Muslim populations in Europe by 2030 will be 11%. By 2050, it'll be about 12.5%. Fertility rates in Turkey are down at replacement levels at 2%. Fertility rates in Morocco are down at 2%. The images that are constructive of Islam just taking over Europe and Muslim immigration do not bear up to the facts. And these combine with other misperceptions. How many jobs are taken away by immigrants? We just did a report that just came out from Chatham House about the future of Europe, polling 10 countries. 31% of people believe the jobs are mostly taken away by immigrants. 50% think crime is worse, even though it isn't. 53% think that Islam and the West are irreconcilable and that migration should be stopped from Islamic countries. These are pretty radical numbers. So what's happening in a way is that we're seeing polarization being driven and being fed migration at a moment of extreme vulnerability for Western institutions, which is why this problem is so real and why it needs to be confronted. So let me close with some answers, because I don't want to leave you here with issues. And there is no silver bullet. There is no one thing you can do to fix a problem and a challenge that's been emerging for such a long time. Number one, give more control to local government and just take maybe a little less of the taxpayer money away from central government. Local communities are best at dealing with local immigration. National governments, however, must set standards for immigrant integration and about their way of contributing to national institutions. Education is probably at the top. Segregated education contributes to the negative aspects of integration, inability to learn language, and feeding values into classrooms. The values of our societies are critical. At the same time, the law is the law. If we are societies of rule of law, and if the treatment of women in our societies is X, then any community in our societies has to stick with that same rule of law, and it must be upheld by government. But at the same time, governments need to educate domestically born populations, about the realities of immigration, and not the kind of scaremongering that we saw taking place in the Brexit debate. Fourth, governments must ensure that borders are seen to be as controlled as possible. Fifth, we must have fair and transparent immigration systems. Part of the reason so many people jump on the boats to try and get across the Mediterranean is they don't think there is a fair way in. You've got to then have a multi-layered approach, assist refugees as much as close to home as possible before they get on the boats here. And something that I know Kees is particularly specialized on, you've got to help people around the neighborhood through trade, through investment, through foreign investment, through helping build institutions. So let me close with just a couple of thoughts. Immigration is coming. More will continue. It is not a choice for Europe, yes or no. Climate change, continuing conflict, natural disasters, GPS, smartphones, take your pick, criminal gangs, diasporas here, the pull is going to happen. The question is how to engage people as best you can. What I would say is, remember, national identity is not created through ethnicity, but through shared history, through shared institutions. And I think that immigrants can do as much as any of us to help build that identity in the future.
Hello, my name is Kees Rietveld. I've been traveling for 30 years in places like Afghanistan and Somalia and Yemen. I'm Dutch, and the place where I was born, prior to that, if people would stop pumping, would be sea. So there never was ever anybody else in the place where I was born than the people who started pumping. It makes for part of the Dutch cultural sense of community, which lives. It predates the Dutch state, the control of the dikes, and will postdate the Dutch state. One of the good things of traveling is that you get to think and you get to read. And so I was reading on the archaeology of Elam when I was in DRC last week. And I came across Frederick Barth, and he gave a definition of an ethnic group, and he gives the definition: self-perpetuating, culturally recognizable, and he said the ethnic groups comes to the fore under stress, on the conflicts for scarce resources or under stress. This is applicable, obviously, in the West, but also in the East. One of the great things, I think, which is missing in this whole dialogue is a look at why would an Afghan, or why would an Iraqi Christian, or why would a Syrian, or why would a sub-Saharan African leave their home country? These people actually like living there. It is not, I think we are a bit too self-congratulatory if we say that they have no bigger desires than join the flesh pots of Europe. So something is going wrong. They're leaving for a good reason. And as a physician, I think that if you look at the symptom and you just treat the symptom, which is the flows of refugees, and you ignore what drives them out of their country, you're not solving the issue. You're just solving the presentation of the issue. So I take you out to Central Asia, to the Taklamadan Desert in 1918, where Oral Stein walked, and he had been there before in 1903, and he realized when he was looking for the wandering river of the Yasin that the place was drying up, even in the times he was looking, and then he started studying it just prior to the First World War, and he came to the conclusion that it must be an effect of Central Asia still coming out of the last ice age. Now, pair that with the current global warming, we got a perfect storm in the Central Asian pivot. This is not a purely hypothetical thing. This is places like Lake of Lop Nor is drying up, the Aral Sea is drying up, the big rivers, the Yangtze Kiang, the Mekong, the Indus, the Ganges, the Amur River. And basically you're talking about huge populations which see their water resources under threat and continuing under threat. The city of Lanzhou in the Gansu province in China, which is a very water-deprived city, in March they set up a deal with, they would take a pipeline, a water pipeline, all through the Gobi Desert to the Baikal Lake to pump water in that city. That is just, you know, they're pumping water out of this desert. At the same time, Pakistan, the second issue here is population growth. If you look at Pakistan, first time I went, there were 80 million people. Now we are nearing 200 million people. This is, at the same time, the economy hasn't grown, hasn't quadrupled. The water in the Indus has, if anything, dwindled. The schooling hasn't improved, hasn't increased. Health services hasn't increased. So basically everybody in Pakistan got 4 times as poor. And so Paul Collier says that when people travel, they travel for economic reasons. If you look at the settling into the United States, and then there's this big story about the Galician Jews leaving Galicia under the pogroms of the Russians, that's a little group. But if you look at the numbers, the big groups are Irish flying the potato famine and Germans just looking for opportunity. People travel for opportunity. Which brings me to the point that as they leave Pakistan because there is no reason, there's no options for them to work in Pakistan. Take Syria. Syria in 1948, there were 2 million Syrians. There were, of them there were a good 1 million and a bit were Christians. Currently, there are 18 million Syrians. The Rietveld, if anything, has been dammed. The biggest growth has been in the Syrian desert. Now, the water has not kept pace with the population growth. So the Syrian war, whatever people may say, was a water war. There was not enough water. It was just the first water war in many. So, last year I was in Gaza, in Palestine. There's 2 million people living in Palestine. They're drawing water from an aquifer. It is 55 million cubic meters a year. In 2016, they're drawing out 200 million cubic meters. We are a good one, they are a good 145 million cubic meters short. So, desalination plants are possible, are being constructed. There's currently a big alliance is setting up a desalination plant of 70 million cubic meters, which is not enough. And the moment it will, and it will be a struggle for the international coalition who brings up the money to keep pace with the water needs of the population of Gaza. Now these people can't go anywhere. Like I was sitting in, you're sitting and you have a coffee and you chat and we bitch about Saudis and then I told them about 1 million refugees to Germany and to the director of the water board. He said, well, you take out the water blockage, you got next year, you will have 1 million Palestinians more. He said, we can swim to Cyprus. So, it is a bit like we are just looking at this like, oh, this is only a European problem, this is only a United States problem, and we don't look at what is happening in Africa. We don't look at what is happening in Central Asia. Well, it is coming our way. If you look at the projections 20 years down the road, of the 27 most water-deprived countries, of the 33 will be in our neighborhood. In the meantime, anywhere between the Indus and the Atlantic, populations doubled every 20 years. I was in Somalia in 1990. It was at the time already a population-trapped country, which means there's more people in the country than the country has water and land for to feed. The population was 6 million. with the exodus, with the war of 20 years, currently the population is 10 million. Egypt was in 1980 22 million. It is now 100 million, going to double every 20 years. The Nile is drying up, people are damming, there will be a war within my lifetime and within your lifetime about water of the Nile. So, conflicts, okay. Now, we are, as the West, we are so bloody self-observed. If you look, okay, look at the budget of the United States. Last year, the military spending 1,600 and a bit million on weapons. Development assistance, billion. Development assistance, 30 billion. Number of refugees resettled, 85,000. So what you see is a picture of the West just being scared of what's happening out there and refusing to do anything about it. Then you would say development assistance. Development assistance has been all in my lifetime about great projects. A famous form, 80% on top of it returns to the Western coffers. So let me give a nice example. Barbara Bush thought it was a good idea to have a children's hospital in Basra. So they did. It was a bloody expensive thing. Only they forgot to put in sewerage. When I looked at the place in 2014, sewerage was coming up to the second floor. Now, if you look, DRC, basically, it has been going downhill for the last 45 years. People say it is development assistant. No, it is not just a nice hospital things. It is about a cultural change. If you add up the numbers now, it is easily imaginable that in 20 years, if we don't do anything about it, and that is not walls, that is solving the bloody issue in the Middle East, in Asia, and in Africa, we'll have 1 billion people coming towards Europe. We are in the wrong neighborhood. It cannot be done. The issue is water, economic opportunities, and population control, family planning programs. They are not there. There's a biblical exodus coming our way, and we have no way as a society of coping with that, whatever people may say. Of course, one has humanitarian things, but our humanitarian obligations lie in Asia, lie in Africa, and don't necessarily lie in sacrificing our own societies. Culture. I think the whole idea, I switch now if you allow me. I have not been much in the West, but I have a couple of ideas about this subject. A society works on the culture, and the Dutch example I said in the first is a good example. I mean, it works on a communal. How was the Netherlands, how was the water got out of the lakes? It was like everybody communal. There was a system of taxes which predated the state, which was communal, local water taxes, the water board, which predates the state. People were doing it together. So that leads to a Dutch culture, and we as Dutch, we consider the water management board very, very, very important, because if it stops pumping, I mean, within a couple of weeks, we're below water. And culture is not just Praxiteles or Bach. Culture is a society system of expectations of what do you do? What are your obligations as a person towards a society, and what is the obligation of the society towards you? In Afghanistan or in Saudi Arabia, there is a working system. I don't care which system there is. There's a system of giving aid. Every 10% of your salary goes into arms, and that people are very serious about it. People stop and pay a lot of money in these arms. It's a good system. It's not my system. It's the system which works in Saudi Arabia. Afghanistan, I had this discussion, I was in Afghanistan when the Taliban were there and the rest was not. And then I spoke to people. I said, there were things you can settle up accepting that setup of a society. It is not my society, but if they want it, that's their choice. Now, the important bit is there that a society works through a big group of cultural, social connections, which makes it, which makes it work. Brings me to the. Can I make one last?
I hate to cut you off.
Yeah.
We've got so many comments thus far. You guys are doing an amazing job of
okay.
provoking
Sorry.
people to think and to question. So I'm going to give you 1 minute, not two. Sorry.
Okay, welfare state, I will make one last point. Welfare state versus xenophobia. You cannot have a welfare state with open borders. It is unaffordable. One entails the other. That's why all the Nordic countries, Denmark, Sweden, are xenophobic, because one goes with the other. It's easy to be accessing a lot of people if you don't give them anything. If you let them, you know, for the United States, it's no problem. You don't give them anything, so what stops you getting them in? If like in Denmark, you have a good hospital system, you have a good healthcare system, you have a good educational system, which people contribute to. They are happy to pay their taxes as opposed to the President of the United States. Because they see what their tax dollar buys them. At the same time, they then resent freeloaders who are coming in just for the resources. Because if you've got 1 billion people coming to Denmark, guess what? There won't be enough funds. And I'll drop it here.
Kees and Robin, thank you so much. They were going to have a point-counterpoint between themselves. I think I'm going to ask that you guys do that later, because they're going to be moderating one of our 5 discussions. So as I said, so many comments have already come through. We're going to transition now to a short 4-minute video made by 2 Dutch photojournalists who were filming in the refugee camp in Calais, France. And we want to show you the last 4 minutes of what happened as they were filming.
Mid-January 2016, international media have gathered in Calais to witness the upcoming eviction. Information is scarce and contradictory.
Dan zal 9 over 9, Maaike.
Kwartiertje rondlopen en gaan?
Ja.
I'm looking for the line, if you know it is.
Wait, je vous montre. Yeah. Now it's interesting, looks like it's going to be quiet.
For today?
Oui.
I think so, but I don't know.
On a eu chaque jour une de incidents violents avec les gens ici. Hier een pickpocket.
Okay.
Mike, je wil even voorlopen of niet? Nee, ik wil eventjes daar bovenop kruipen om overzicht te hebben. Ja. De filmmaker of niet? Ja. Hey! Help me! Attends! C'est pas de mon monnaie, hein. Doe maar retour, oké? Godverdomme!
Ça va?
Oui, ça va.
Quelque chose, si vous a fait mal?
Non. Merci, hein. Merci pour m'aider.
Who was the person, Arabic or Afghan?
Arabic, quoi. Arabic of Afghan.
Afghan.
Oui, pas noir comme vous. Arabe. Merci pour nous aider.
Thanks, man.
Merci, hein.
We posted this footage online. The clip of our attack went viral and provoked a media storm. We were accused of fueling the right-wing anti-migrant agenda. Others said that we were ignorant, naive, bleeding heart lefties.
People are starting to realise now that the downside of things like Facebook and Twitter and so on is that you start to create an echo chamber of your own beliefs, and the way that these pieces of software or whatever are designed can actually exacerbate that, because some of these have algorithms that anticipate what they think you like, so they'll point you towards stories your friends have shared that seem to confirm your beliefs. So you can end up in a situation where you think everyone thinks the same way that you do. I'd say the thing about the migration crisis is that it tends to polarize people. You know, there's not too many people in Europe who are completely ambivalent. It's more like very simplifying the story. They're either completely vulnerable and they're victims and we should feel sorry for them and help them in any way, or they're an invasion army, basically. You know, we're going to come here to overwhelm our society, molest our women, take our jobs, raise a black flag of Islam, change our eating habits, push down our salaries. Taking more sort of polarised positions on this is a way of generating interest and controversy. People will tend to gravitate towards something that either really strongly affirms their beliefs, or they'll get very het up by something that doesn't, you know, that's the opposite of what they think, but they'll definitely get a reaction. Having something that's controversial will play to that new way of judging success of a news piece in terms of how widely it's shared. Making these news reports into something that's a bit more clickbaity by making them lean one way or the other on very emotive subjects, I think is a strategy that news channels have put into place now.
Between their conversation and that video, I think that we have certainly provoked questions. One of the things I was thinking out there is one of those guys right? Is one of them wrong? Are they both wrong? Are they both right? And if one is wrong, does the other have to be right? So we want to break into 5 groups now. Again, those of you upstairs, if you'd like to come down and join us, we'd love to welcome you. And moderators from today, Kees and Robin and other moderators and panelists are going to help lead a discussion, get started a discussion, and we want to hear from you. Again, the graffiti app to use is www.snf.org/conference, and then go to Speak Up Online Graffiti. Some of you are using questions, and if you use the online graffiti icon within that app, then we'll all get them in one place. So let's divide into 5 groups. Group A are all of you guys, I'm sorry, Group A is everybody in the front. Group B, you guys to the right. Group C, rows 5 through 10 here in the center in the orchestra. Group D will be rows 11 through 16 or 15, and then Group E is this section here. I said right, that's left, this is right, is this section to my right. So we'll have 20 minutes of conversation. Questions will be posted, so if you do get stuck or you want some ideas, look up here because you'll hear from your fellow conference attendees. Thank you.